The wine soaked into the hem of my dress before the laughter even started. Corvin had thrown the goblet at my feet on purpose. I knew it the way I knew the weight of my own breath, because I had watched his wrist turn, watched him choose the angle so the dark red would splash up my apron and not his own boots. A serving girl learns to read a hand before it moves. I had learned to read hands long before I ever carried a tray.
"Clean it,"
he said. The great hall of Vero had gone quiet the way a forest goes quiet before something with teeth walks through it. 50 guests, perhaps more, all of them high-born wolves, in fine wool and polished silver, and every one of them watching the beta of the pack humiliate a girl who scrubbed floors for her bread. It was good entertainment. It cost them nothing, so I knelt. I pressed the rag to the cold stone and dragged it through the spreading wine, and I kept my eyes lowered to the floor where a maid's eyes are meant to stay. Corvin crouched down in front of me so the whole hall could see him do it. He was handsome in the way a blade is handsome, all edges and no warmth, and he wore his rank like a man who had never once had it questioned. He tilted his head. He wanted me to look up. He wanted the fear. "You missed a spot," he said softly, and he ground his boot heel into the clean stone, smearing a fresh streak of red across the part I had already wiped. The hall laughed. It rolled through them like a wave, easy and cruel, and somewhere near the high table I heard a woman say, "What a patient little mouse," and the laughter climbed higher. I looked at his boot. I looked at the tendon along the top of his foot, the one that a person can crush with 2 fingers pressed, just so, the one that would drop a grown wolf, screaming to the floor, and leave him limping for a season. What? I looked at the soft place under his jaw, where the great vein runs close to the skin. I looked at his wrist, still resting on his knee, and I counted, without meaning to, the 4 ways I could break it before he finished his next breath. Then I wiped the stone again, because, that is the thing, no one in that bright and laughing hall understood. My hands did not shake, because I was afraid. My hands were still, because stillness was the first lesson, the oldest lesson, the one that had been beaten and bled and whispered into me, across 10 long years, in a place none of these people could find on any map. These soft hands, scrubbing wine, had ended more lives than Corvin had ever threatened. And the whole reason I was here, on my knees, breathing slow and keeping my eyes down, was that I had sworn on everything left of my burned and buried home, that I would never let them see it again. Not the anger, not the speed, not the truth of what I was. There was a name for what I was, in the tongue of the veil where I had been made. It does not matter now. The people who spoke that tongue are wind and ash, and a smell that still finds me in my sleep. But the thing the name described was not ash. It was folded small inside me and kept quiet, the way you might keep a live coal wrapped in wet cloth. It does not go out. It only waits for air. "Look at me when I speak to you," Corvin said. And I felt it then. The old thing, waking up behind my ribs, the cold, clear river that used to carry me through rooms full of armed men, and out the other side, with my hands red and my heart calm. It rose. It wanted him. It would have taken so little. I breathed. I pushed it back down. I lifted my eyes only as high as his collar, the way a frightened girl would, and I whispered, "Forgive me, my lord." He smiled satisfied and stood, and turned back to his cup, already forgetting me, because to him I was nothing, a spill, a shape that mopped the floor. He never once felt how close he had come to dying in front of 40 witnesses who would have sworn on their lives they saw a maid do nothing at all. I finished the floor. I gathered the rag and the shards of the goblet into my apron, and I rose without a sound, and as I turned toward the servant's door, I felt a gaze land on the back of my neck, like a hand laid flat against bare skin, not Corvin's. Corvin never watched anything he had already broken. This was heavier, older. It came from the high table, from the tall carved chair at its center, from the one wolf in that hall who had not laughed even once. The Alpha King was watching me. I did not look up. I made myself keep walking, one plain and weary step after another, a tired girl, carrying broken glass toward a door. But I felt his eyes travel the length of me, slow and thoughtful, the way a hunter's eyes travel a tree line, where something has just moved and gone still. And for the first time in 3 careful, silent, invisible years inside these walls, I had the cold and certain feeling that someone had finally seen the way I moved, that the face I had worn so well and so long had, for one single breath in a hall full of wine and laughter, slipped my name. The one they knew me by was Vesna. It was not the name my mother gave me. My mother and father had been gone since before I was carried up into the mountains, and the name they left me, I let die on the night the veil of Ilmar fell, and every soul in it with it, and I left it in the ash where it belonged. Vesna was a safe name, a soft name. It meant nothing, and it belonged to no one, which was exactly why I had chosen it 3 years earlier, when I walked out of the mountains half-starved and asked for work at the lowest gate of Vero Keep. They gave me a bucket and a corner of the scullery to sleep in, and they never asked where I had come from, because girls who arrive with nothing are not worth the trouble of a question. That suited me. A girl worth no questions is a girl who can disappear. Vivero was the greatest of the pack seats in all the lands of Sundermore, a fortress of black stone, grown up around an older tower whose stones no living mason could name. The pack that ruled it was old and proud and strong, and at its head sat Aldrich, the Alpha King, a wolf whose name mothers used to quiet their children, and whose word could raise an army or end one. I had served in his hall for 3 years, and I had spoken to him, exactly never. That was the goal. In a place like Vero, the safest thing a hidden creature can be is furniture. So, I made myself furniture. I learned which floorboards told tales, and I never stepped on them. I learned to carry a full tray through a crowded room without letting my shoulder brush a single guest, not out of grace, but out of habit, because the master who raised me had taught me that the untouched are the unremembered. I kept my back a little bent, and my steps a little short, and my eyes a little dull, and I wore the face of a tired girl who wanted nothing but to survive the day. And it was such a good face that most days I almost believed it myself. There was another reason for the bent back and the dull eyes. One, I did not speak aloud even to myself. In the dark, the fires that took the Vale of Ilmar had not been an accident of war. Someone had ordered them. Someone had wanted the Vale and its people, and above all its trained warriors, gone from the world, root and branch. And that someone had never once shown me a face. If any word ever reached the wrong ear, that one of Ilmar's hidden hands still breathed, still walked, still carried wine in a northern hall, then the fires would come looking for me too. So I did not merely hide from Corvin, or from the pack, or from the shame of the floor. I hid from a hunter I had never seen, and I had been hiding so long and so well that I had almost let myself forget he was still out there somewhere, patient, listening for exactly the kind of story a single raised hand would tell. The kitchens were their own small country, ruled by heat and hunger and the temper of the head cook, and it was there that I let myself have the one soft thing I allowed. Her name was Enna. She was younger than me by a few years, and she talked the way a stream runs, without stopping and without any care for where it was going, and she had decided, sometime in my first winter, that I was her friend, whether I wished it or not. I had not wished it. A hidden creature should love nothing, because everything it loves becomes a rope that others can pull. But Enna would save me the burned crust off the morning loaf, and press it into my hand with a grin as if she were passing me a secret, and slowly, without my permission, she had become the one rope I could not bring myself to cut. The night of the wine, she was waiting for me in the scullery. When I came in with my apron full of broken glass, "He did it again," she said. It was not a question. She had heard, everyone had heard. News of my shame traveled faster than I could carry it. "It is only wine," I said. "It is never only wine with Corvin." She took the shards from my apron with careful fingers, the way you would take something from a person you thought might be hurt. "One of these days he is going to go too far, Vesna, and there will be no one to stop him, because who stops a beta? Who would even dare?" I dried my hands on a clean cloth, and I did not answer her, because the true answer was standing right in front of her wearing a tired girl's face, and she would never know it. "Promise me you will keep your head down," Anna said. I looked at her, at the kindness in her that the world had not yet managed to grind away, and I felt the old, cold river stir again, quieter now, patient as a held breath. "I always keep my head down," I told her. It was the truth. It was also the most dangerous kind of lie, the kind you tell so well that you forget it is one. Because a head kept down is a head that can still be raised. And somewhere above us, in a hall of black stone, an alpha king was sitting very still in his great carved chair, turning over in his mind the memory of a maid who had knelt in spilled wine and had not trembled at all. Corvin did not forget me, whatever I had hoped. A cruel man remembers the ones who do not break, because a thing unbroken is a challenge, and Corvin had never in his life left a challenge alone. It began small, the way these things always do. A tray sent back to the kitchen for no fault, so that I would have to carry it up the long stair again, while he watched and timed me. A word dropped in the steward's ear that the scullery girl called Vesna was slow, was insolent, was owed a lesson, so that my rations were cut and my hours grew longer. He was clever about it. He never raised a hand where a witness of rank might see and think it beneath the dignity of a beta to trouble himself with a floor scrubber. He worked in the small dark spaces between other people's attention, and there he squeezed. There was a night he made me hold a lantern for him in the freezing yard while he pretended to inspect the horses, for no reason at all except that he could, and he kept me standing with my arm raised until it shook, and then until it burned, and then until it went numb and dead at my side. That I had done well. That was the worst of it, the gentleness, because it meant he had savored every moment, and meant to have many more. Another night, he ordered the whole scullery scrubbed twice over past midnight, claiming he smelled smoke where there was none, and I scrubbed until my knuckles split and bled, while he leaned in the doorway and watched the red drip onto the clean wet stone. I let him. That was the discipline. Every night, I lay on my thin pallet in the scullery corner, and I counted the ways I could have ended it that day, and every night, I set the counting aside and I chose, again, to be furniture. The master who raised me had a saying: "The mountain does not chase the goat, it simply waits and outlasts." And one day the goat is bones, and the mountain is still the mountain. I had made myself a mountain. I could wait. But Corvin was not patient, and patience is the only thing that can truly starve a cruel man, and so denied the fear he wanted from me. He went looking for it somewhere softer. He went looking for Enna. I did not see the start of it. I was hauling water across the lower yard when I heard the sound that turns a person cold before the mind even names it, the small, sharp cry of someone who is being hurt and cannot get away. I set the buckets down. I did not run. Running is loud, and a hidden creature does not announce itself. I walked fast and quiet around the corner of the brewhouse, and there in the shadow between the wall and the woodpile I saw them. Corvin had Enna by the arm, wrenching it up hard behind her back, while she gasped and struggled and could not pull free, because he was a wolf of the blood, and she was a kitchen girl, and in the ordinary way of the world that was simply the end of the matter. He had chosen the spot well, no windows, no witnesses of rank, only the two of them, and now me, a thing that mopped floors. "You will learn to hold your tongue," he was telling her, low and pleased. "Or I will snap this arm like a dry reed and tell them you fell." Enna saw me over his shoulder. Her eyes found mine and they filled with a terrible hope, and I hated that hope, because it was aimed at Vesna, the tired girl, the friend who could do nothing, and I did not know yet which of my two faces I was about to wear. The cold river rose in me, and this time it did not stop where I always made it stop. It rose past my ribs, and up into my throat, and behind my eyes, 10 years of stillness, cracking all at once, and every quiet lesson in me stood up and asked, in the voice of a master long dead, whether I had truly come all this way, and buried all these names, only to stand in a yard and watch the one rope I could not cut be broken in front of me. I ran the arithmetic the way I had been trained to, without wanting to, unable to stop it. 6 steps to close the distance. He was turned 3/4 away, his weight settled on his front foot, his shoulder open, his throat bare above the collar. I could put him on the cold ground before he understood the yard held a second living thing. I could do it in silence. Match. I could do it so cleanly that Enna, telling the tale after, would swear the beta had simply slipped on the wet stones and struck his head, and there would be no maid anywhere in her story at all, because the master who raised me had taught me that the finest work leaves no mark, no witness, and no name behind it. But there was a price, and I knew the price, and the knowing of it was the very wall I had built for exactly this moment. If I moved, truly moved, the way I alone in that keep could move, then Vesna, the tired girl, would die in this yard as surely as if Corvin had put his hands around her throat, and the thing the world had been hunting for years would stand up in her place, in the open, in the daylight, where any eye might see and any tongue might carry the tale to the faceless hunter who was still, somewhere, listening. 3 years of silence, a whole buried life. Everything, spent in a single breath, for one kitchen girl and the sound of her fear. Corvin twisted Anna's arm further. She screamed. And my feet, which had spent 3 years never stepping on the boards that tell tales, carried me one step forward, onto the loud and open ground. But the mind my master had built in me was already moving faster than my feet, and it did not let me do the thing my heart wanted. The heart wanted to cross the yard and take Corvin apart. The mind said no. The mind said, if you move like what you are, you die tonight, and so does the girl, because the faceless one will hear of it. The mind offered me another way, a smaller and uglier and cleverer way, and I took it. My lord, I cried out, and the voice that came from me was Vesna's voice, thin and frightened, breaking in the middle, the way a scared girl's voice breaks. I did not stride, I stumbled. I came around the woodpile with my arms flapping and my feet skidding on the wet stones. A foolish scullery maid who had blundered into a place she did not belong and was too clumsy to stop herself. Corvin turned his head toward me, his lip already curling to send me away, and I fell into them. To any eye watching, it was nothing at all. A skinny kitchen girl, losing her footing on slick ground, pitching forward with a yelp, one flailing hand slapping against the beta's raised forearm as she went down in a heap of skirts and shame. Clumsy. The sort of thing that earns a maid a kick and a week of laughter told at her expense, but my hand did not slap his forearm. My 2 stiffened fingers found the narrow seam between the bones of his wrist, the small buried cord that sleeps there, the one the master had made me strike 10,000 times against a post wound in rope, until I could find it blind, in the dark, at a dead run, with my own blood in my eyes. I pressed once, hard and exact, and I turned my knuckle the way the striking of it must be turned. Corvin's hand opened. It had no say in the matter. Every finger sprang wide at once, as though the whole arm had stopped belonging to him. And Enna dropped free against the woodpile and scrambled back, gasping, alive. I hit the ground and I made it look wretched. I sprawled. I cried out, as if I had knocked the wind from myself. I clutched my own wrist, as though I had hurt it in the fall, and I lay there in the mud, and the wood chips being nothing, being furniture, being Vesna. Corvin staggered back a full step, cradling his arm against his chest. He stared at his own hand where it hung slack and stupid at the end of his wrist, the fingers only now beginning to twitch and answer him again, and across his face went a thing I had never once seen there, not anger, not yet, confusion. The blank, groping confusion of a man whose own body has betrayed him for a reason he cannot name. He looked at Enna fleeing across the yard. He looked at me, a heap of skirts whimpering in the muck. He looked back at his hand. I watched him reach for the only answer his pride would allow him. The maid tripped. The clumsy fool knocked his arm. As she fell, struck some nerve. By dumb accident, nothing more. Of course. What else could it be? There was no other story a beta of the blood could tell himself about a floor scrubber in the mud, and because he needed to bury the confusion under something, he chose rage. He crossed to me in 2 strides, and his good hand knotted in my hair and hauled my head up, and he struck me once across the face, hard enough that the yard tilted and rang. I let him. I let my head snap with it, and I let the tears come, because tears were cheap, and cover was not. And every bit of temper he spent on Vesna was temper he was not spending, trying to understand what had truly happened to his hand. It would have taken me the space of 1 breath to stop him, to take the wrist in my hair and fold it backward until the bone begged to put him face down in the mud he was grinding me into. I counted the moves as he struck me. I always counted, and I chose, again, to be a mountain, and to let the goat kick. It is a strange thing, to be struck, and to know that the striking is the safest thing in the room. It was a small price paid to keep a large secret, and I had paid far larger prices for smaller secrets in my life. So I let the coin of my pain buy silence. I curled around the truth the way a hand curls around a coal, taking the burn so that the light would not show through my fingers, and I let Corvin believe he was breaking something in me. A man who believes he is breaking you stops looking for the thing in you that cannot be broken. Clumsy, he spat, breathing hard, and he threw my head back down. Worthless, half-witted mudrat. Get out of my sight. I crawled. I gathered myself up like a broken thing and I limped for the far arch, and only when I reached its shadow did I let myself lift my eyes. Someone stood at the mouth of the yard, not a servant, not a guard. An old wolf, broad and gray at the temple, with a warrior's stillness and a scar that split 1 eyebrow, and I knew him by sight though I had never spoken to him. Doran. The king's sworn shield, the oldest blade in Viero, the one man Aldrich trusted at his back. He was not looking at Corvin. He was looking at the wet stones where I had fallen, and then at me, and his eyes were not the eyes of a man who had watched a clumsy girl trip. They were narrow and quiet and very, very old, and they moved over me the way a smith's eyes move over a blade that has been painted to look like tin. He had seen the fall. I was suddenly and terribly certain he had seen what was under it. For 3 years I had built a wall, out of 1,000 small nothings, out of bent shoulders and dull eyes, and trays that never once brushed a guest. A wall like that can stand against 100 careless glances, and never show a seam. But it had never been built to stand against 1 careful look, and Duran had just given me a careful one. Then he turned, without a word and without the smallest flicker of his scarred face, and walked back the way he had come. He left me in the shadow of the arch with my heart going like a war drum and 1 cold certainty settling into my bones. My wall had a crack in it now, and an old and patient wolf had marked exactly where. Doran said nothing to me that night, nor the next day, and the silence was worse than any question, because a question can be answered and a silence only waits. I went back to being Vesna. I carried my swollen cheek through the kitchens like a badge of my clumsiness, and I let Enna fuss over it, with a cold cloth and frightened eyes, and when she whispered that she owed me her life, I told her, truthfully, that she owed me nothing, that I had only fallen at a lucky moment. She wanted to believe it. People always want to believe, the small, safe story over the large, strange one. It is the thing that had kept me alive for 3 years, and I leaned on it now. But Corvin did not want the small, safe story. I saw it in him over the days that followed, a splinter working its way deeper. He watched me. He came to the scullery on thin excuses. He asked the steward where the girl Vesna had come from, and how long she had served, and who had spoken for her. And the steward, who knew nothing because there was nothing to know, told him nothing, and that nothing gnawed at the beta worse than any answer could have. A man like Corvin cannot bear a locked door. He had felt his own hand betray him in that yard, and some animal part of him had understood, even if his pride would never say it aloud, that the door had a lock, and the maid was the key. I began to think about leaving Viero. I lay awake pricing it out. 3 years of care undone in a single fall, a beta sniffing at my past, the king's own shield staring at the stones. Every instinct the master had ground into me said the same cold word: run. A hidden thing that has been glimpsed does not wait to be caught. It goes into the dark, and it becomes a rumor, and then it becomes nothing at all. I had almost decided. I had my small bundle half made in my mind, the road south chosen, the story I would tell at the gate. And I am ashamed even now of how close I came to going. Not because leaving was wrong. Leaving was the wise thing, the trained thing, the thing that had kept me breathing when wiser and stronger people than me chose to stand their ground and died for it. I am ashamed because in all my careful pricing of the road south, I had already decided to leave Enna behind. I had folded her up and set her down like a thing I was finished with, the one rope I had sworn I could never cut, and I had cut it in my mind without so much as feeling the blade. That was what 3 years of being furniture had done to me. It had almost made the lie true. And then the riders came, and the choosing was taken out of my hands. They came at dusk, 3 of them, on horses ridden near to death, and the sound they brought into the yard silenced the whole keep fire in the west. Villages under Viero's own protection burned to their foundations in a single night, the fields salted with ash, and not one soul left breathing to say who had done it. Not a survivor, not a hostage, not a wounded child in a ditch. Only ash, and a mark burned into what timbers still stood. A mark the riders described with shaking voices, a ring of flame with a broken center. I set down the pot I was carrying very carefully, so that no one would see my hands. I knew that mark. I had last seen it on the smoking gatepost of my own home in the Vale of Ilmar, 10 years and a lifetime ago, on the night everyone I loved became wind and ash. The hand that had made it had never been found. The face behind it had never been shown to me. For 10 years I had tried to tell myself the mark was a thing of my nightmares, half remembered, grown monstrous in the dark of my own grief. I had needed it to be that. A grief you can outrun is an easier thing to carry than a hunter. You cannot. But there is no mistaking a shape you have seen burned into the wood above your own mother's door. The broken ring of flame was real. It had always been real. And the patient hand that painted it had not stopped its work when it finished. With my valley, it had simply moved on, village by village, season by season, and now it had come north at last, to the one place in all the wide world I had dared to call almost safe. And now it was here in Sundermoor, painting itself onto the king's own lands. The great hall filled that night with a colder crowd than the one that had laughed at my wine. Aldrich sat in his carved chair and heard the riders out, and I, carrying wine along the wall as I was made to, watched the Alpha King's face, and saw a wolf who understood. He was being tested by something patient and without mercy. He asked hard questions in a low voice. He did not bluster. That, more than his crown, was why men followed him. Corvin bluffed for the both of them. He rose before the hall and called the burnings the work of ragged bandits, cowards who struck the weak and would scatter like rats before real wolves, and he begged the honor of leading a company west to end them. And the young and the hot in the hall pounded the tables for him. He wanted the glory. He wanted to be seen. He did not once ask why bandits would burn a village worth nothing and leave not a single thing behind to steal. I could have told him why. I could have told the whole bright hall why, in 3 plain sentences, and every wolf under that black stone roof would have gone cold to the marrow. But the girl who knew was a maid against the wall with a jug of wine, and maids do not speak in the king's hall, and so the one person in all of Viero who understood exactly what was walking toward them held her tongue and poured, and hated the poured wine, and hated the held tongue. Aldrich watched his beta boast, and his face gave away nothing, but I saw his eyes flick, only once, to the old shield standing at his shoulder. And Doran, who had said not a word to me in days, chose that moment to turn his scarred and quiet gaze across the whole crowded hall and rest it, for a single long breath, on a maid pouring wine against the wall. Corvin got his company, and out of pure spite, he put me in it. He could not name what had happened in the yard, but he had decided the maid was a stone in his boot, and a beta on campaign may do as he likes with the servants who carry his camp. So the order came down through the steward. The girl Vesna would march west with the baggage, to cook and haul and empty the slop, and if she died on the road, well, one mud rat more or less would not trouble the path. Anna wept and begged me not to go, as if I had any say in it, and I held her thin shoulders and told her I would come back, and I meant it, though I could not have told her how I knew. We rode west for 3 days into a country that grew quieter and blacker as we went. The company was 40 strong wolves, in the pride of their strength, and Corvin at their head, sitting his horse like a man already composing the song they would sing of him. He did not once send scouts far enough. He did not once make a proper camp. He believed he was hunting frightened bandits. And belief like that is a blindfold a clever enemy is glad to leave in place. I walked with the baggage, and I watched the tree line, and everything the master had put in me was screaming. The ash villages we passed told a story Corvin could not read, but I could. The burnings were not the work of a mob. The fallen were not the fallen of a panicked raid. I saw the cold order in the ruins, the signs of a thing done slowly and on purpose, and without any heat of anger. This was not the work of rage. This was method, patient and practiced, the mark of a hand that had done the same thing many times before, and felt nothing at all while it worked. This was a trained hand, doing patient work, and it was the same hand, the very same, that had unmade my home. I knew its signature, the way you know, a voice in the dark, and that knowing put a question in me that I could not set down for the rest of that black march. If the hand that burned Ilmar had reached all the way north to Sundermoor, then it had not come here by chance. It had come on purpose, the way it did, everything on purpose, and the only purpose large enough to draw such a hand this far was one I did not yet dare to say, inside my own skull. So I walked with the baggage, and I carried the question like a stone held in my mouth, and with every ash village we passed, the stone grew heavier, until I could taste on the cold wind that whatever was coming had been coming for a very long time, and that I was walking step by tired step, straight into the center of it. On the 4th night, they let us make camp in a shallow valley, with a burned village at its foot, and I knew, with the flat certainty of arithmetic, that we were already surrounded. I had known since noon. I had felt the woods go wrong, felt the birds fall silent in a ring that moved with us and tightened as the light died. I tried, as Vesna, to say a frightened girl's small warning to the wolf nearest me, that the birds had stopped, that something was out there. He told me to shut my mouth and stir the pot. They came with the last of the light. They came out of the black tree line without a sound until they wanted sound, and then all at once they made a great deal of it, and it was chaos, and chaos was what they had come to sell. Fire arrows into the tents. Horses screaming and tearing their pickets. Wolves grabbing for blades, half asleep, half armored, thrown from their pride into terror in the space of 3 heartbeats. Corvin was shouting orders no one could hear. The company that had ridden west to sing of itself was dying in a burning valley, and it did not even understand yet that it had lost. I stayed low behind the baggage, and I did the hardest thing the master ever taught, which is nothing. I watched for the shape of it. Every fight has a shape, he used to say, and the fool swings at the noise, while the master waits for the center to show itself. So I waited for the center, and in the leaping firelight I found it. They were driving the survivors, herding the panicked wolves the way they had herded the villagers, pushing them toward the low end of the valley, where more killers waited in the dark to finish the work in one tidy slaughter. And at the front of that doomed and stumbling crowd, cut off from his men, his sword out, but his face, at last stripped bare of every boast, was Corvin. And beyond him, because the king had not been able to let his beta ride to a burning alone and had come west himself, by a hard road to shadow the company, striding down into the chaos with Doran at his side, and a handful of sworn men around him, blade already red, was Aldrich. The Alpha King had walked into the trap to save the fool who had set himself in it. And the center of the enemy, the true one, the trained hand behind all of it, saw him. I watched it happen. I watched a tall figure at the tree line lift a horn and sound it, and I watched the whole shape of the ambush turn, like a single animal toward the king, every killer in that valley abandoning the lesser prey to fold in around the greatest. And I understood in one cold breath that this had never been about a village or a company at all. The fires had been bait, the bandits had been bait. All of it, every burned home from here to Ilmar, had been a hand reaching patiently across 10 years toward this exact moment to draw the Alpha King of Varro down into a valley and put him in the ground. It would not be enough. I could see from where I crouched that it would not be enough, that the shape of the thing had already closed over him, that in 100 heartbeats or less, the king and his shield and his last few men would be a red ruin on the valley floor. Every lesson in me told me to stay down, to let it happen, to keep the secret that had kept me breathing for 3 years, and slip away in the confusion and live. I rose out of the dark behind the baggage, and I let the coal come off the wet cloth at last, and I stepped into the light. For 3 years, I had moved like a tired girl. Now I stopped pretending, and the pretending fell away from me, like a mask I had held in place too long, and the thing underneath it, the thing the veil of Ilmer had made and the fires had failed to kill, stood up in a burning valley and remembered what it was for. The master used to say that every fight has a shape, and that the fool swings at the noise while the master waits for the center to show itself and then breaks the center, and once the center is broken, the shape falls and the fight is already over, though the fools keep swinging. I had read the shape of this fight an hour ago. Now I walked into it. The first killer never heard me. He was set at the edge of the herd, driving the panicked wolves toward the low ground, his back half turned, and I came out of the dark behind him, and took his knee sideways with the heel of my hand and rolled his own falling weight against the joint, and he went down without a cry and did not get up. And I had his long knife before his shoulder touched the mud. I did not stop moving. Stopping is dying. The master had drummed that into me before I could read. You are water, he would say, and water does not pause to admire the stone it has just gone around. I went through them toward the king. I will not pretend it was a dance. It was ugly, and it was fast, and it was work. The plain, hard work I had been built for, and had spent 3 years pretending my hands had never learned. I did not fight the way the wolves fought, all fury and teeth and pride. I fought the way a locksmith opens a lock, one small, exact motion at a time, each one turning the whole shape a little further toward its fall. A wrist bent past where a wrist will go, a throat found with an elbow. A big man's own rush used to fold him into the man behind him. I took no blows I did not have to take, and I wasted no motion on any enemy who was not between me and where I needed to be, because the master's last lesson, the one he taught me on the worst night of my life, was that mercy and haste are the same thing when the ones you love are dying. And they were dying. That was the drumbeat under everything. Every heartbeat I spent was a wolf that fell, and so I did not spend a single one I did not have to. I reached the center of the shape just as it closed on the king. Aldrich fought like the song they would have sung of Corvin, if Corvin had ever been the thing he pretended to be. He stood over a fallen, sworn man with Doran at his shoulder, and a ring of killers drawing tight around them both. And he was magnificent and he was losing, because there were too many and they were too good, and they had made this trap with 10 years of patience. A spearman set himself behind the king's blind side, low, patient, waiting for the opening that would surely come, and it would have come, and it would have ended the line of Vayue in the mud of a nameless valley. I took the spearman first. I came in under the spear, inside its reach, where a spear is only a long stick, and I put the borrowed knife where it needed to go and turned him out of the fight. And then I was at the king's blind side where the killing blow should have landed, and I stayed there. I did not announce myself. I did not have breath to waste on announcing. I simply became the wall on the side of him that had no wall, and the shape of the enemy, which had been about to break him, met something it had not planned for and could not read, and it faltered. That falter was all I needed. A shape that falters is a shape that shows its center, and I broke 3 of them in the time it takes to tell it, and Duran, who was old and quiet and the finest blade in Vero, understood in a single glance what had just arrived at his king's side, and he fought harder, and the ring that had been closing began, for the first time that night, to come apart. Aldrich turned his head. In the red leaping light, with a dead spearman at his feet who should have killed him, the Alpha King of Viro looked at the thing that had saved his life and saw a maid. Saw the swollen cheek his beta had given her. Saw the scullery girl who poured his wine against the wall, standing in a ring of the fallen with a borrowed knife, and eyes as calm and cold as deep water moving like nothing he had seen in all his years of war. He did not speak. There was no time, but something passed across his face in that instant. That was not shock, or not only shock. It was the look of a man who has been handed the answer to a question that has been troubling him for weeks, and finds it stranger and larger than anything he had guessed. Then a horn sounded from the tree line. Not the horn that had turned the ambush toward the king. A different note, low and long and final, and every killer still standing broke off at once and melted backward into the dark as smoothly as they had come, leaving their dead and taking their discipline with them. And that discipline in retreat frightened me more than all their knives had. Rabble does not retreat like that. Only a trained hand pulls a blade back so cleanly. I looked to the tree line for the hand that had done it. He was there. A tall figure against the last light, unhurried while all his killers flowed past him into the trees. And though I could not see his face, I did not need to, because he had gone very still, and he was looking back across the whole burning valley, across the dead and the dying and the king of Vero at me. He had seen me move, and a man who knew the shape of that movement, who could read it the way I read, the mark burned on the gateposts, was a man who had been trained where I was trained. There was only one place in the world that made hands like mine. There was only one place it had ever existed, and it was Ash, and I had believed for 10 years that I was the last thing left alive that had ever walked its yards. I was wrong. He lifted one hand to me across the valley, slow, almost gentle, the way you greet a thing you have been looking for a very long time. Then he turned and was gone, into the dark, and I stood among the dead with the king's eyes on the side of my face, and I understood that the fire that took Ilmar had not been a stranger's fire at all. We buried 19 of our own in the valley, and carried the wounded home on the wagons, and I rode back to Varo no longer as a thing that mopped the floors. There is no putting a coal back in wet cloth once it has burned through. 40 wolves had ridden west, and a little more than half rode home. And every one of the living had seen the maid, called Vesna, walk through a trap that was killing them, and pull the king out of it by the roots. There was no lie left, large enough to cover that. By the time the gates of the Black Keep opened for us, I had stopped trying to find one. They did not know what to do with me. That was the strange thing. The thing I had not braced for in all my years of planning what would happen if I was ever seen. I had always imagined the seeing as an ending, a door slamming, torches and chains, and the faceless hunter arriving to finish what the fires had started. I had never imagined this, the confused and shifting quiet of a whole, keep trying to decide what a person is, when she is not the person they had all agreed she was. I found I did not know how to stand in it. For 3 years every waking motion had been shaped around not being seen. And now that I was seen, I kept reaching for the old habits and finding them gone, like a tongue going again and again to the gap where a tooth has been pulled. I would catch myself bending my shoulders out of habit in a doorway, and then, on purpose, straighten them. And the straightening felt more exposed than any blade ever had. A hidden thing spends so long learning to disappear that it forgets there was ever another way to be, and being handed back the open air after 10 years is not the simple gift you would think. It is a country you no longer have the language for. I had wanted to be seen my whole life, and mourned the wanting in secret, and now that it had come I had to learn, clumsy as a child, how to let it happen. The servants did not meet my eyes, but now it was a different not meeting, edged with awe and a little fear. The wolves who had fought beside me gave me a rough short nod when they passed, the nod they gave each other, and did not seem to know they were doing it, and Corvin would not look at me at all. That was its own kind of loud, his not looking. He had ridden home from a disaster he had led his company into, saved only by the mud rat he had beaten in a yard, and he could feel the pack doing the arithmetic he could not stop them from doing. A beta is only a beta while the pack believes in him. He had felt the belief begin to slide, and a man like Corvin, feeling the ground go, does not steady himself, he looks for someone to push off of. Anna found me the first night back and threw her arms around me, and wept. And then held me at arm's length and looked at me as though seeing a stranger wearing her friend's face, which in a way she was. 3 years, she said. 3 years, and you never once. You let him, in the yard. You let him hit you. And all that time you could have. Yes, I said, why? And I found I could not give her the whole answer, the burned veil and the faceless brother, and the 10 years of running. Not yet, not standing in the scullery with the pots. So I gave her the only piece of it that was small enough to hold. Because the moment they see what I am, I said, the thing that made me runs out of places to hide. I stayed a maid to stay alive, Anna, and to keep the people near me alive, because being near me has never once been safe. She was quiet a long moment. Then she took my hand, the hand she had watched break under Corvin's boot, the hand she now knew could have ended him, and she held it the same as she always had. I do not care what you are, she said. You are still the one who saved me. You are still the one who saves the crust off the loaf and pretends not to. I had not wept in 10 years. I did not weep then either. Not quite. But it was a near thing, and that it was a near thing at all told me how much of the mountain had cracked. The summons came on the second morning. Not the steward, not a guard. Doran himself, filling the scullery door with his scarred quiet, come to bring the maid to the king. He looked at me a long moment before he spoke, the same careful look he had given me in the yard, and now I let him look, because there was no point any longer in the bent shoulders and the dull eyes. I stood the way I truly stood. His eyes moved over it, and something in the old wolf's face settled, the way a man settles when a thing he has long suspected is finally admitted in the open. I have seen that stance once before, he said, a long time ago. A company of the Vale came through Viaro when I was young, on their way to a war, and their sword-master sparred with our best and put 6 of them on the ground without drawing his blade, and he stood exactly the way you are standing now. He paused. I was told, some years back, that every soul of that veil was dead, burned out, root and branch. You were told the truth, I said. Nearly. Doran nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed a heavy thing, rather than denied it. The king is waiting, he said. And then, at the door, without turning back, in a voice pitched for me alone, whatever he asks you, girl, tell him true. He is the rarest thing our kind makes, a strong wolf, who would rather know a hard truth than rule a soft lie. Do not waste that on him. I followed the old shield up through the black, keep to the king, and I felt the whole weight of 10 careful years pressing on the back of my neck, because I knew what Aldrich would ask, and I knew that to answer it I would have to say aloud, for the first time since the fires, the name my mother gave me. Aldrich received me alone, save for Doran at the door, in a small stone room, with a fire, and 2 chairs and none of the crown about it. He did not sit above me. He gestured me to the second chair as though I were a lord come to council. And when I hesitated, because 3 years of the floor do not leave the knees easily, he waited, patient, until I sat. You saved my life, he said, and the life of my shield, and what was left of my company. I have thanked the men who fought beside me. I find I do not know how to thank you, because I do not know who you are. So I will ask, and I will ask only once, and what you tell me stays in this room if you wish it. Who are you? I looked into the fire, and I let the name come up out of the ash where I had buried it. My mother called me Sable, I said. I was born in the Vale of Ilmar, in the high country west of here, in a place you will not find on your maps, because there is nothing left of it to mark. Vesna is a name I took at your gate. Sable is the name I was hunting when I answered to it just now, and it took me a moment to find it because I have not let myself be her in 10 years. And then I told him. I had never told anyone, and I found once I began that I could not stop. The way a dam once cracked does not crack politely. I told him what Ilmar had been. Not a kingdom, not a pack, but an order, older than the packs, that took in the orphaned and the given and the ones no one else wanted, and made of them something the world had mostly forgotten how to make. Not soldiers. Soldiers are common. The Vale made hands, single hands, each one worth a company, trained from the cradle in the old disciplines of stillness and speed and the shape of a fight, and it sent them out into the world to stand between the weak and the strong wherever the strong grew too fond of eating the weak. The Vale asked no coin, it served no crown. There were never many of us at once. A few dozen hands in all the world in any given year, scattered thin across 100 borders, and yet kings lost sleep over those few dozen, because a hand of Ilmar could not be bought and could not be threatened and could not be found until it chose to be. There is nothing on this earth a powerful man fears more than a thing he cannot buy. And that, in the end, was why it had to die, because a hand that cannot be bought and cannot be ruled is a terror to every power that would rather the world stayed viable. I told him about my master, who had found me in a burned market town with my whole family dead around me, and had carried me up into the mountains, and spent the next 10 years turning my grief into something with the use. I told him he had trained 2 of us above all the rest, myself and a boy some years older, the finest hand the Vale had made in a generation, quick and cold and brilliant, whom the master loved the way you love the student who exceeds you. His name was Sarn, I said, and I heard my own voice go flat and strange saying it, and the night the fires came, the night everyone I loved died, it was Sarn who opened the Vale to the ones who set them. He knew every watch, every path, every stone. No stranger could have unmade Ilmar in a single night, only a brother could. He sold the Vale, and everyone in it, and our master most of all, to a patron I have never seen, in exchange for what such men are always bought with. And then, because a betrayer cannot rest while a single witness lives who could name him, he spent 10 years walking the world burning out every survivor of the order, one by one, and marking his work with the sign of our own gate turned into a broken ring, so that any of us still living would see it and know he was coming. Aldrich had gone very still. "The mark on my villages," he said. "He was not burning your villages," I said. "He was calling me." He must have caught some rumor, some whisper, that one of Ilmar's hands still breathed in the north, and he did what he has always done. He lit fires and waited to see which shadow flinched, and I flinched. I rose in your valley, and I moved the way only the Vale's hands move, and now he does not merely suspect. Now he knows. The last witness who can put his name to the master's murder is alive, and she is inside the walls of the AO, and Sarn does not leave witnesses. I made myself meet the king's eyes. "He will come here," I said. "Not with an ambush in the woods here, to your gate, with everything he has. Because I am here, and while I live his 10 years of carefully racing are undone. I have brought the fire that took my home to yours. That is who I am. I understand if you would rather I was gone from your walls by morning. And I will go, and I will lead him away. And that is the only honest gift I have left to give you." For a long moment, the only sound was the fire. Then Aldrich leaned forward, and there was no fear in his face, and no calculation, only the settled certainty of a wolf who has finally found a fight worth the whole of him. "You have spent 10 years running so that others would not burn for you," he said, "and it has not once bought you a night's peace, because a hunter like that is not escaped, only delayed. So we will not run." He said "we" as if it were the plainest word in the world. Let him come to Varro. Let him bring his patient fire to a wall that has never fallen, and to a pack that owes its king's life to the last hand of Ilmar. You have stood between the weak and the strong your whole life alone, Sable. I am offering you the one thing your order never had, a pack at your back. And I, who had trusted no one in 10 years, who had made loving even one kitchen girl feel like a reckless indulgence, sat in a small warm room and felt the last stone of the mountain I had built come loose, and did not try to catch it. Corvin made his move the night before the fire came. He had spent the days since our return watching his world come apart, and he had understood, in the low animal way, he understood everything, that the maid was the axle it was all turning on. Before me, he had been the pack's certain future. After me, he was the beta, who led half a company to slaughter, and was pulled from the mud by a scullery girl. He could feel the king's regard shifting toward me, could feel the pack's belief in him thinning by the hour, and a man like Corvin does not ask himself whether he has earned his fall. He asks who to blame for it, and how to make them pay, and how to climb back up over their body. I had seen the shape of him clearly from the first day, and the spilled wine, and so none of what he did surprised me, though it sickened me. A brave man who falls asks how he failed. A Corvin looks for a smaller throat than his own. He spent those days whispering, and the whispers came back to me the way whispers always find the one they are about. Through Enna, through the kitchen boys, through the wolves who still had a shred of decency and did not like what they were hearing. The maid was unnatural. The maid had called the burning down on the villages with some curse of her dead and cursed people. The maid had bewitched the king himself. Look how he kept her close. Look how his eye followed her across a room. It was clumsy poison. But poison does not have to be clever to work on the frightened, and after a night in a burning valley, there were plenty of the frightened. He decided the way back up was to prove the pack had been bewitched. That the maid was no hero of some dead order, but a thing of ill omen who had brought a curse to Varro's gate, and that he, Corvin, would be the one to cast it out and save them all, and so reclaim in one stroke everything he had lost. But he was not fool enough to face me himself. He had felt my hand in the yard, even if his pride had never let him name it. So he did what small cruel men do when they cannot reach the strong. He reached for the soft thing the strong one loved. He took Enna. I learned it near midnight, when a kitchen boy came pounding to my door white-faced with the message Corvin had made him carry, that the beta had the girl in the old watchtower on the north wall, and that the maid was to come alone, and unarmed. The beta would open her friend's throat and swear to the pack that the witch's curse had driven the poor girl to fling herself from the tower in the night. He had thought it through, in his way. If I came and knelt and let him parade me as a monster before witnesses, he had his redemption. If I came and killed him, to save her, he had a dead beta and a maid with blood on her hands, and a story the pack was already half ready to believe. He thought he had built a trap, with no wrong door for me, and no wrong door for him. He did not understand what he had taken, or from whom. I went to the tower. I went quiet, and I went alone, because those parts of his terms suited me well enough. But I did not go unarmed, because I am never unarmed, a truth Corvin had spent 3 years failing to learn. He had Enna at the tower's edge, with a blade at her throat, and his back to the open drop. And he had 2 of his hangers on with him, young wolves who still believed in him, posted at the stair. He was smiling that bladed smile when I came up into the moonlight, and I could see he had already won the whole scene in his mind, could see him savoring the sight of the terrible maid come meek and cornered at last. "On your knees," he said, "and when the guards come, you will tell them what you are. You will confess the curse, or she goes over." Enna was not weeping. That is the thing I will remember. She looked at me across the tower with her chin up, and her eyes fierce and wet, and she gave the smallest shake of her head, telling me not to trade myself for her, telling me she would rather go over the wall than be the rope that finally pulled me down. The kitchen girl who talked like a running stream had more iron in her in that moment than the beta with the knife. I loved her for it, and it settled the last of the matter for me. I let my eyes move over the whole of the tower the way the master had taught me, once, slow, taking in all of it. The 2 young wolves at the stair, nervous, their hands too tight on their blades, boys playing at being hard men and not liking the game now that it had grown real. Corvin at the edge with the long drop at his back, which he thought was his safety, and I read, as the mistake it was. The knife at Enna's throat, held by a hand that was, I could see even in the moonlight, beginning to shake. He had built his trap in a hurry and in fear, and a trap built in fear has seams in it, and I had been finding the seams in things since before Corvin first learned to shave. "Corvin," I said, and I let my voice be, for the first time in front of him, my own, not Vesna's frightened crack, Sable's voice, level and quiet and certain, the voice of the veil. "You have spent 3 years mistaking my silence for weakness, and tonight you have made the last of your mistakes. I am going to give you 1 chance, which is 1 more than you have ever given anyone. Let her go, and kneel to your king in the morning and live." He laughed, but it was not a whole laugh. Somewhere under it, for the first time, I heard the small cold note of a man who has begun, too late, to suspect the size of the thing in front of him. And then, far below us and beyond the wall, out in the black fields, where no fire should be, a single point of orange light bloomed in the dark. Then, another. Then a long ragged line of them, torches without number come in the night, as I had promised the king they would, and a horn sounded across the fields in a low and final note I had last heard in a burning valley. Sarn had come to Vero. Everything happened at once, the way the worst things always do, and the master's voice was in me through all of it, calm as still water. "When the world speeds up," he used to say, "you slow down. That is the whole secret. That is the only secret." Corvin's head turned toward the torches, toward the horn, and in that half-breath of his distraction, I crossed the tower. I did not kill him. I want that known, because it would have been the easy thing, and the master taught me that the easy thing and the right thing are almost never the same door. I took the knife from Enna's throat with 1 hand, and took Corvin's wrist with the other, and I turned him off of her, and put him down against the stone, hard, and pinned the blade arm in a lock that the smallest motion would break. His 2 young wolves came off the stair at me, and I did not let go of Corvin to deal with them. I did not need to. I had learned to end a fight without spending my hands. A shift of weight sent the first into the second, and Enna, my fierce Enna, snatched up the fallen knife and set herself between them and the stair with such sudden ferocity that the two boys who had signed on to bully a maid and not to die in a tower went pale and still. "You feel that?" I said to Corvin, low, my mouth near his ear, while his own knife hovered, a hair from his own throat in his own trapped hand. "That is how close you have been every single day, for 3 years. I could have done this in the yard. I could have done it over the spilled wine. I chose not to, over and over, because I am not the thing you tried to make the pack believe I am. Remember that. In whatever life you have left, the maid you mocked could have killed you 100 times and let you live." I leaned the last word in. "That is what strength is. You never once knew what it looked like." I let him up. "I should not have. But I am the Vale's hand, not Sarn's. And the difference between us is the whole of the point." The fire came to the walls, and I left Corvin his life and his shame, and went down to meet it. The battle for Viero that night is a song other people can sing. I was not in most of it. Aldrich had made his pack ready with the days I had bought him, and the black wall that had never fallen did not fall, and the king fought at its head, like the thing the Vale itself might have made if it made kings. That part of the night belonged to Viero. The other part belonged to me and to Sarn. He found me, or I found him, the way the two last hands of a dead master will always find each other. He came over the north wall alone, while his killers spent themselves on the gate, because he had not truly come for Viero at all. He had come for me, the last witness, the loose thread of a 10-year murder, and he climbed into the moonlight of the same tower where Corvin had made his little trap, and at last, after 10 years, I saw the face of the thing that burned my home. He looked so ordinary, that was the horror of it, not a monster. A tired man near 40, with our master's own footwork and eyes that had decided, long ago, that the world was buyable, and that only a fool stays a coin no one can spend. "Little Sable," he said, almost kind. "He always said you would be the best of us. In the end, I did not believe him. I am beginning to." "You opened the gate," I said. "You let them in. You watched him die." "I chose to live," Sarn said, "in a world that was going to burn the Vale with me in it or without me. He taught us to stand between the weak and the strong, and I looked at the strong, truly looked, and I understood that the strong always win, and that the only madness is to stand in front of them. You have spent 10 years learning the same lesson the hard way, running, hiding, scrubbing floors. You know I am right. Come with me. There is a place in it for a hand like yours. My patron would pay a kingdom for the last of Ilmar." And there it was, the whole of the difference between us, laid out plain in the moonlight. He truly believed it. He had told himself the lie so long and so well that he had forgotten it was one. The way I had almost forgotten Enna. "You had the best hands the Vale ever made," I said, "and you used them to hold a door open for murderers. Our master spent his life turning grief into something with a use. You turned yours into a knife for hire. That is not seeing the world clearly, Sarn. That is just fear. That learned to talk like wisdom." We did not speak again. There was nothing left to say, and we both knew it. And two hands of the Vale do not waste breath, they will need. I will not pretend the fight was one-sided. He was everything the master had loved him for, quick and cold and brilliant, and he had 10 years of killing behind his hands, and I had 10 years of hiding behind mine. Twice he nearly ended it. He knew the same forms, I knew, could read the same shapes, and for a while we were so evenly matched that the tower rang with it, and neither of us could find the center of the other. But there is a thing the master taught me on the last night of his life. The night the fires came, when he pressed me down into a hidden cleft in the rock and told me to live and be the Vale when the Vale was gone. He taught me a single closing form, and he wept while he taught it, and he told me he had never shown it to another student, not even Sarn, because it could only be given to a hand he trusted never to sell it. It is not a fast form. It is not a strong one, it is a patient one. It gives ground, and gives ground, and gives ground, and lets the other believe he is winning right up until the single moment he overreaches into the shape you have been building for him the whole time, the shape whose center is the space where he now stands. Sarn had never seen it, he could not read it, because our master, even loving him, had known what he was, and had kept this one last thing back. I gave him the ground. I let him drive me across the tower, let him believe the last of Ilmar was failing at last, and I watched the certainty come up in his ordinary tired face, and at the one moment it made him reach past his own balance for the finish. I closed the shape I had been building since the fight began. It was over very quickly. Then the master would have been proud of how little of it there was. Sarn lay against the same stones, where Corvin had held a knife to Enna's throat an hour before, and the moonlight was on his ordinary face, and he looked up at me with something that was almost relief, the relief of a coin that has finally been spent. "He was right about you," he said. "Who was your patron?" I asked him. "Who paid for the veil?" But he only smiled, our master's own tired smile on a traitor's mouth. And he took that answer with him into the dark, and left me standing over him with the one question I had waited 10 years to answer still unanswered, and a colder one rising behind it. Because a patron, who could pay a kingdom to erase the Order of Ilmar, was still out there, somewhere, and now that patron's finest knife was dead on a tower in Vihero, and mine was the hand that had done it. We won the wall. The song can tell that part. By the gray of morning Sarn's hired killers were broken and scattered, and the broken ring of flame did not burn on a single stone of Viro, and the pack that had laughed at a maid over spilled wine stood bloody and unbowed on its unfallen wall, and looked at that same maid as at something out of the old stories they had stopped believing. Corvin they found at first, light, gone. He had not waited for the king's judgment, or the pack's. Sometime in the chaos of the night he had slipped the gate and run, taking with him nothing but the knowledge which he would carry for the rest of his small life, that he had held the last hand of Ilmar at his mercy, in a yard for 3 years, and had never once known what he had, and had spent that mercy on nothing but his own cruelty. I did not hunt him. A man who must live inside Corvin every day of his life has already been sentenced by a harder judge than me. Aldrich offered me a place, not a servant's place. He stood on the wall in the gray light with his pack around him, and he offered the last hand of a dead order, the thing that order had never had in all its proud and lonely centuries: a home, a pack, a wall at her back, and people worth standing in front of. And he offered it in front of all of them, so that no one could ever again mistake what I was for what I had pretended to be. I will not tell you everything that has grown between the King of Vero and me since that morning, because some of it is still growing, and the best things do not like to be spoken of too early. I will only say that a wolf, who would rather know a hard truth than rule a soft lie, is a rare thing, as Doran told me, and that I have stopped counting the ways I could leave a room and started learning the ways I might stay in one. Enna runs the kitchens now, or rules them, more like, and still saves me the burned crust off the morning loaf, and still presses it into my hand with a grin as if it were a secret. And I have stopped pretending I do not need it. The one rope I could not cut turned out to be the one that pulled me back up. There is a lesson in that the master never taught me, and I think he would have been glad I learned it somewhere. Doran comes to sit with me sometimes in the evenings, the old shield and the last hand, 2 people who carry more dead than living behind their eyes. He told me once that he had spent his whole life guarding one wolf's back, and had never thought to ask what he was guarding it for, and that watching me walk down into that valley had answered a question he had not known he was carrying. We do not talk a great deal. People who have both stood inside the shape of a fight do not need many words. But he has taken it on himself to teach the king's youngest guards the old careful watching, the reading of a tree line, the birds falling silent in a ring that moves with you and tightens as the light goes. And I think that is his way of making sure the arrow is never again caught blind. The way my poor company was caught. It is a good way the master would have liked him. I am not a maid anymore. I am not furniture. I stand at the king's council now with the veil's stillness in me, and I have begun, quietly, to do a thing I never thought I would live to do. There are others out there, not of Ilmar. Ilmar is ash. But there are orphaned and given and unwanted children in the world still, the kind the veil used to take in, and there is no one left to make of them what the veil made of me, to stand between the weak and the strong, when the strong grow too fond of eating the weak. Aldrich has given me a quiet corner of Sundermoor and leave to try. It will not be the veil, nothing will ever be the veil, but it will be something, and it will be mine, and it will be built this time, behind a wall that does not fall. There are 7 of them already, 7 children no one else wanted, given, or orphaned, or simply overlooked, sleeping now in a long warm room in a quiet corner of the keep, where 3 years ago a maid slept on a cold scullery floor. The eldest is a girl of maybe 9, with eyes that have already seen far too much, and hands that will not stay still. And when I look at her I see the market town, and the burned bodies, and the man who carried me up a mountain and made my grief into something with a use. I have started to teach her stillness. It is the first lesson. It is always the first lesson. So that is the answer to the question Sarn took into the dark in a way. Who was the patron who paid a kingdom to erase every hand that could not be bought or ruled? I do not know his name yet. But I know his kind, now, the powers who would rather the world stayed viable, and I know that such a power does not spend a kingdom on a thing and then forget it, and that the day is coming when he learns that his finest knife is dead on a northern wall, and that the last daughter of Ilmar did not burn after all and did not run this time, and is building the very thing he paid to destroy, out in the open, under a king's protection, with a pack at her back. Let him come north when he is ready. I spent 10 years being the thing that flinched when he lit his fires. I am done flinching this time. When the hunter goes looking in the dark to see which shadow moves, he is going to find one waiting for him that lights a fire of its own. And this time, it will be his gateposts that carry the mark.